Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of MetsMusings.
And hello and welcome to episode number 112 of MetsMusings. I'm Gary Mack, and it's great to be with you this week, and especially since the Mets have had a better week this week. I know it wasn't the greatest. Not counting tonight's game, they went 3-4 since our last broadcast. But we have seen the future. And it looks bright. It looks good. As Matt Harvey and Zack Wheeler both pitched this week, the same day, Matt Harvey almost pitched a no-no on Tuesday against the Atlanta Braves in the first game of a day-night doubleheader. And Zack Wheeler made his Major League debut in the second game. Pitched pretty darn good, let me tell you. He struggled with his control, but he battled the whole way, fought his way through, got out of jams, very impressive. Pitched 6 scoreless innings. The Mets got a home run and got the win for him, so he got his first Major League victory in that day-night doubleheader. The rest of the week, well, it didn't start off too good. They lost 2 Friday and Saturday. They went down to the Cubs. Cubs beat them. But Sunday was an exciting game. They looked terrible the whole game. Awful. Just plain awful. They threw the ball around like little leaguers. It was awful. But Kurt Neuenhuis hit a big 2-run homer in the bottom of the ninth. A walk-off homer, and that seemed to spark this team. They went down to Atlanta Monday, lost the game, but Dylan G pitched a gorgeous game, made one bad pitch in the bottom of the ninth, gave up a 2-run homer, lost the game 2-1, but pitched magnificent baseball. Then the Harvey Wheeler day on Tuesday, Mets took both of them. And then last night, as we record this on Thursday, June 20th, 2013, last night they lost. They went down. Sean Markham did not look good again. Right now, they're playing the Braves in the final game of the series, and John Neese has looked better, struggled a little bit. David Wright hit a home run in the first inning. Atlanta came right back, tie it up. Neese got through the second, and as we record this, they're in the top of the third, so we'll keep an eye on that, and if we get a final, we'll give it to you. But why am I enthusiastic? Because the starting pitching, it looks like it's coming around. It looks solid. The bullpen, granted, is still a big question mark. The main problem with this team now is the offense. They have to find some combination to score runs. And in doing that, it appears, looking for that combination, that the team has taken, the front office especially, has taken a different tack on this season, and it's going to be, if you don't deliver, you will be gone. Case in point, we already know that Ike Davis and Robert Carson and Mike Baxter was sent down. Josh Satin, Colin Cowgill, and who was the other? Josh Edgin were brought back up. Neuenhuis had been brought up ahead of that. We know that. But now the Mets acquired Eric Young Jr. to get some speed at the top of the lineup and a center fielder who will split time with Lagares, I believe, and play some in other spots. And so the Mets acquired him, and they got him by trading Colin McHugh, who you remember was DFA'd, designated for assignment, as was Eric Young Jr. by Colorado, but they were able to work out a deal and swap those players. So Eric Young is now a New York Met, and he started his first game yesterday and is playing again this evening. Also, Andrew Brown was recalled from Las Vegas, and Colin Cowgill was designated for assignment. So, again, it seems like the Mets are trying all kinds of combinations to try to get something going here in the offensive category. Now, so they will be moving things around and trying to see what some of these younger players have. I do like Juan Lagares in center field. That kid can play. He can't, he's working on his hitting, and that might come a little slower. But we got to remember. Look what Carlos Gomez did. Now, of course, that was a great trade for us. So we got Johan Santana. There's no argument with that. But now he's a little older and he's coming into his own. Carlos Gomez. So. Now that he's with Milwaukee and coming into his own. So maybe the same thing is going to happen with Lagares, but he has shown signs that he can hit in this league. Just got to nurture him along in hopes, because he certainly can play center field, so there's no fall off there. Other news in the let's go to the MASH unit and see who got hurt now. Justin Turner was placed on a disabled list with an intercostal strain. There's that intercostal again. And poor Scott Atchison, he just got reinstated off the DL, came in to relieve in a game in Atlanta, and his first or second pitch that he threw, he pulled a groin muscle. So guess where Scott is? He's back on the DL. Bit of good news, though. Travis d'Arnaud met with doctors in New York, and he was cleared to begin a running progression program. He's safe to remove the boot. He said he hasn't needed it for the last week, and he will head back to Port St. Lucie to continue his rehab. So that's good news. Maybe we will see d'Arnaud, but I don't think we'll see him much before September at this point. And the Mets and their first-round draft pick, Dominic Smith, have agreed to a deal worth a little more than $2.6 million. The 18-year-old Smith is a first baseman out of high school in California, was the 11th overall selection in the 2013 first-year player draft. So Dominic Smith is in the house. And finally, congratulations to David Wright, who got his 1,500th career hit in Tuesday's doubleheader, Game 2. He got that hit, so congratulations to David Wright. And folks, we have a reason to be optimistic. Watching Wheeler and Harvey pitch in the same day was really, really lit my fire. And of course, the Neuenhuis home run on Sunday was a big boost. And maybe we can put something together. They're playing a tough team, Atlanta, first place team, and they're playing them very tough. Yes, I know they've lost. They're 2-2 so far in this 5-game set. Last week I said 4-game set, which it was originally. I forgot that there was a day-night doubleheader on Tuesday. But so they're 2-2 against the Braves so far, and really nobody thought at that point when the Mets were coming down here after that Chicago series that they'd be in these games that well. But let's keep our fingers crossed for tonight that Jonathan East can deliver a spectacular game, and they get him some runs, and they win. And then it'll be on to Philly. And talking about Philly, our guest tonight is Rich Baxter, who is the voice of BaseballPodcast.net and the Fighting Phillies podcast, as well as the Fighting Phillies blog. Rich Baxter will join me in just a few minutes to take us through the Phillies and the Mets series coming up this weekend. But before he gets here, let's take a short break for these messages. For all the listeners of MetsMusings, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 14-day trial to give you a chance to check out their service. Over 75,000 titles to choose from in all different categories, including science fiction, mysteries, biographies, sports, computers, you name it, they have it to download. To download your free audiobook today, go to audiblepodcast.com/MetsMusings. Again, that's audiblepodcast.com/MetsMusings for your free audiobook.
Hi, this is the world-famous Mr. Brewtown of BrewtownSports.Podomatic.com. You know, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Brewtown Sports. You can also listen to the show at Stitcher.com, TuneIn.com, and iTunes.com. And we've got the new one. It's called BrewtownRadio.Weebly.com. But the one that I'm most proud of being on is BaseballPodcast.net. It is the home of great baseball talk shows. Check it out, my show and all kinds of other programs all about Major League Baseball. So check it out. That's baseballpodcast.net, the home for great baseball talk shows.
Five 516-619-6341. That is the voicemail comment hotline. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can drop us give us a call, I should say, at that number. Or you can email us at metsmusings@gmail.com. Or there's another way to send a voicemail. Go to our website, metsmusings.com. Click on the widget on the right-hand side and send a voicemail right on the website. And we'll play it right here on the show. And don't forget, you can find us at MetsMusings.com, Stitcher.com, TuneIn.com, iTunes.com, and, of course, BaseballPodcast.net, the home of great baseball talk shows. And I'm joined on the show tonight by Rich Baxter of Fightin' Phillies, the blog and the podcast. And you all know Rich because you hear his voice here every week doing the promo for baseballpodcast.net. So, Rich, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Hey, Gary. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show.
Well, I'm always glad to have you on. And, Rich, we're going to talk a little about the Phillies and the Mets with the big 3-game series coming up. Phillies are doing better than the Mets, but they're hanging around the 500 mark. I think they're 3 games under at this point. What's been the Phillies' problem this year?
Well, we were talking a little bit about this before we did the interview here. The Phillies just are very bad in scoring runs this year. They just can't seem to score the runs when they need them. And it's just they've had a lot of opportunities, but they can't put it all together.
Yeah, it sounds like the Mets, they're doing the same thing. They get the guys on base, can't get that one big hit to get them in. But
yep.
You've uncovered a diamond in the rough with Dominic Brown. He's been doing something that they've been waiting for him to do, the last couple of years. He's really seeming to coming into his own this year.
Yes, he has. It's been a real pleasant surprise for a lot of people. I know, over the last few years, he was touted as being the next big thing on the Phillies, and he's had a good run in the first couple months of the season. He's kind of leveled off in the last couple weeks compared to that tear that he was on in May. He was the player of the month, the NL player of the month, and he was the player of the week a couple times in May. So he was completely on fire, off the charts. He's been doing pretty well in the last couple of weeks, but not quite as good as May.
And Ryan Howard has, I've heard various reports. I've watched a few of the games, and in some of the games, he looked like he's okay. In some of the games, he looks absolutely terrible, like he's in a lot of pain. What's the word out of the Phillies camp on Ryan Howard this year?
Well, Ryan Howard has been complaining of some knee pain for probably 2 months now. Initially, there was nothing said about it, but finally it came to light that, his numbers were not where they should be. He was looking lethargic at the plate, not swinging well, just not that Ryan Howard that we're used to. When the warmer weather used to kick in, he used to kick in. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people were asking the reason why, and they had him looked at by a doctor. They had some scans done, some MRIs. They didn't find any serious issues. I think there was a little tearing in the knees, but of course he's a baseball player. He's been playing ball for probably the better part of his adult life now. So, but he's just been complaining of a soreness in the knee. So no real injury that would put him out on the DL. He's missed games here and there. Charlie Manuel was saying, well, if you don't feel well enough, let me know, and you'll sit the bench. But and that's been happening a couple of games for him. But other than that, he just hasn't had that kind of season that we're used to seeing from him.
And what kind of numbers is he putting up so far? Not
very good at all. Let me get to my Ryan Howard stats here. And usually he's well on his way in the month of June, because that's when the weather starts getting warmer and, he starts kicking into gear. Right now, he's got 37 RBIs and 8 home runs. So, but he's the kind of player that where if he catches a fire, he could bring those numbers up pretty fast.
And, of course, Chase Utley started out the year pretty well. How's he been doing? Did he go on the DL?
He's still on the DL.
Right.
He's on rehab right now. He's getting some rehab starts in the minors. He went 0 for 4 just last night, I believe. But Chase Utley, I believe, may have more serious issues than Ryan Howard at this point. His knees were indeed a problem for him last year. This year, he burst out onto the scene, and he looked like he was a revitalized player. He just, everybody was happy with what he did for the first couple months on the Phillies, and then he got an injury, and now he's got a setback. So it's tough to watch a player like Chase Utley not being able to do what we've been used to him doing. He's a career hitter of 287. So there's a guy that really makes an impact when he plays with the Phillies.
Yeah, and I remember, as you said, he started out the beginning of the year. He was unbelievable. He really looked like the Chase Utley of old, and those knees are a tough thing, boy. Once they go, it's really tough. But
and he's had some other problems too. Maybe some people that don't watch the Phillies quite a lot, maybe they don't know about it. But he's had battles with the yips, I believe they call it, at times, like throwing a ball to first.
Oh, yeah.
The ball 10, 12 feet away from Ryan Howard. He went through a spell of that about 2 years ago, and really people were very concerned about what they were seeing with him. And at the time, it was a big concern, and then it seemed to disappear. So still not sure what happened then, but that was something that he went through as well. And, of course, over the years, you've probably seen some players never recover once they get to that point. They're dragging the first baseman off with every throw almost. Right. And, he came through that. So he's come a long way on a couple fronts.
The Mets had a catcher that had that problem, Mackey Sassa. He couldn't throw the ball back to the mound.
Yeah, it's just,
It's the strangest thing. And, of course, Chuck Knobloch had the problem, and I think Steve Sachs had it for a while there. And, yeah, it's a funny thing how it comes on you all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's just something that is a physical problem and a mental problem, too, because you can't break yourself of it. But hopefully Chase will be back in the lineup. Carlos Ruiz is back. He's been off for quite a bit. He's had a muscle strain himself, but he's back. He used to carry the Phillies offense pretty well, and I've seen a big jump since Ruiz has been back.
Yeah, and he had some year last year.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's really really come of age with the Phillies. Really.
Right. And, of course, your third baseman just got a big milestone.
Yes, he did. 1,000 RBIs for Michael Young. And be honest with you, before he joined the Phillies, I haven't really followed the American League too much, so I didn't really know too much about him. But he's bringing a lot of experience to the Phillies, and he's bringing a good, solid defensive game. And, people look up to a player that's been a player for years, and he's a good mentor for some of the younger guys even.
And he's had a pretty good, solid year.
Yes, he has. I think he's on par with what the Phillies expected and the fans so far. In fact, he's leading the Phillies right now. He's batting .290 as we're recording the podcast here on June 20th. And what can you say about that? It's awesome.
And, of course, Jimmy Rollins is continuing his fine career. He's last I looked, he was having a pretty good, solid season.
Yeah, he's been pretty decent for the Phillies. He does better when he doesn't try to hit as many home runs, and right now he's at 4 home runs on the season. His RBIs could be a little bit better. He's got 24 on the year. But Jimmy's sort of the barometer of the club. When he doesn't do well, a lot of the times the Phillies don't do well. And it's just very odd how that has seemed to be the case over the years, with Rollins being sort of like a barometer of how the Phillies are playing.
Yeah, he's the kickstart.
Yep.
And your outfield, we spoke about Dominic Brown, so take us through the outfield, the positions out there, and how are those guys doing?
Of course, Dominic Brown out in left field. This is his first season as a left fielder, and the Phillies were going to try to convert him from right field to left, and I think he's done a great job. They had another fielder that was supposed to be up and coming for them. Darren Ruff was his name, or is his name, and he's currently in the Phillies minors again. And if anybody remembers him at the end of the season last year for the Phillies, he really went on a tear. He's a home run hitter, and they were going to put him out in left this year, but he didn't have the experience out there. He's a first baseman, and he just wasn't ready, according to the Phillies management, and they sent him back down to the minors. After a somewhat good spring training, a lot of people were looking forward to seeing him on the Phillies. I believe he's 25 years old now, so he's no young player. He's getting on there in years, but Phillies just playing it safe with him, sending him back to the minors, maybe teaching him the ropes in different positions, as Ryan Howard sort of has first base nailed down for now. So those two players were talked about for left field. And the Phillies, of course, signing Ben Revere out in center field. He came over from the Minnesota Twins. He's a young player. I believe he's about 25 as well. And he's got a lot of speed for the Phillies. The Phillies just really impressed with his speed on the bases. His hitting so far hasn't been up to what a lot of people expected with him. He was a .300 hitter with Minnesota. But he's calmed down a bit since he's come onto the Phillies. He's got that good speed, though, so a lot of the times he'll bunt. The Mets should be prepared to look for a lot of bunts from him on this series, I would have to think.
Okay.
Over in right field, John Mayberry Jr. and Delman Young have been sharing the duties out there. Of course, Delman Young, a long-time AL player, last with the Tigers, I believe, and Phillies picked him up on a bargain. He was a well-touted player over the years, and he got into some issues with the Tigers, and no team seemed to want him in the offseason. He's sort of like a Carlos Zambrano. He gets involved in little fracases that have come up from time to time, and the Phillies all of a sudden taking a chance on a lot of these players that have been, borderline problems for teams, including Carlos Zambrano. The Phillies signing him to a minor league deal with a chance to possibly join the starting rotation. I know a lot of Mets fans are probably, that never heard of that, are probably shocked to hear that, but you might see Carlos Zambrano in a Phillies uniform this year.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So that about rounds up the outfield. Of course, Mayberry has been sort of like Dominic Brown. They had a lot of hopes for him to do really well. He's got 5 homers and 18 RBIs, and he's a young player that's been kind of mediocre for them so far this season. Delman Young, the same thing. We've expected a lot more from him. Hasn't really delivered it yet, but the Phillies appear to be keeping him for most of the season anyway.
And, you know, every time I check in, I see Freddie Galvis getting a hit or a triple or something or other. Yet I look at his stats, and his stats aren't that good. But I don't know. Maybe I should stop watching then, because from a Mets point of view, he always seems to get on base whenever I'm watching the Phillies play.
That is true. He's sort of a pesky player, and you're right. He does seem to be a player that should have better numbers so far. He's got 149 at-bats for the Phillies, 4 home runs and 14 RBIs. But like you said, it's those key hits that you seem to remember him getting against certain teams. And he did it out in Colorado about a week ago with the Phillies. They had a comeback out there. And he's an exciting young player. He's a player that could probably fill the shoes of a Chase Utley should the Phillies decide to move him or possibly move him as we get closer to the trade deadline and the All-Star game here. Going to be interesting to see what kind of moves the Phillies make. And I was wondering about the Mets. If you could tell some of the listeners, because I plan to put this on Phillies Talk as well,
Okay.
what kind of moves do you think the Mets are going to make for the All-Star break trade deadline?
Well, the Mets say that they're going to be in it. They want to make some trades, and I would think the guys that they probably would be looking to trade. Now, of course, it all depends if somebody comes and knocks your socks off. But I would think that they may be looking to move Marlon Byrd, who's having a really decent year here. He's great in the clubhouse. He's good with the younger kids, and but I think he would definitely be trade material. Possibly earlier in the year I would have said John Buck, but I'm not so sure as he's come back down to earth, not hitting like he was hitting. And with the injury to Travis d'Arnaud, the big prospect in the AAA, he still hasn't really he only played like a month down there, and then he got hurt, and he's still out. He's just starting his running program now, and I don't think he'll be ready. So that might make them hold on to John Buck. And I would think if there was a taker for Sean Markham, I'm sure that they would get rid of him in a heartbeat if they could. He's 0-9, but he's had some really good – he's pitched some good games and got absolutely no offensive support at all. And that's what they're really looking to fill. And, of course, you know, the rumor about Giancarlo Stanton and the Mets have some young pitchers, but I'd hate to wipe out the entire farm system just to get one guy. But there's a possibility Bobby Parnell's name comes up, and I'm not sure if I'm crazy about that, trading a closer since they've been searching for a closer. But, you know, you never know. I mean, there's guys that they can make minor deals with, and I guess I'd have to say at this time nobody would be untradeable except perhaps David Wright. Mm-hmm. He would be the one guy I think that would not move anywhere. But again, and Matt Harvey and Zack Wheeler, I don't think they would move. Though there are rumors that they might move. They would move Wheeler if it was the deal that really knocked them over. It should be an interesting time because there are a lot of teams that really I think this season in particular are going to be trying to move players this deadline.
Absolutely. There's going to be a free-for-all, and like you said, you have to have a team interested in a player for them to acquire them, and certain players on the Phillies may be moved as well, even the starting pitchers. There's been rumors that Cliff Lee had said in the press about a week ago he wants to be on a winner. And the last time he was saying that, he actually joined the Phillies.
Yeah.
He wanted to be on a winner. So, maybe that was just a message to say, hey, guys, I want to be on a winner. And the Phillies right now are not exactly what you would call a quote-unquote winner.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me to see Ruben Amaro make a deal for him, even though just today in the press he announced that Papelbon and Cliff Lee would not be two players to move off the Phillies, and I think they could be two players that teams want.
Yeah, and if they get a good enough deal, I think you have to move it, especially since they have to start looking towards the future now too.
Absolutely, a lot of the players that have joined the Phillies and your Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee, they joined up. They wanted to come to Philadelphia. Philly at the time was riding a great wave. Roy Oswalt joined them, and on paper it looked like the Phillies were going to be penciled into the World Series when the season started, but it just didn't turn out that way.
And I know Roy Halladay struggled early in the year, and did he have some sort of surgery?
Yeah, he had shoulder surgery. He had a problem within his shoulder, and that was the reason why we saw him getting shelled game after game. He really didn't say anything about it until probably the third or fourth time that it happened. Teams were scoring 7, 8, 9 runs on him, 3 games, and Phillies fans and of course the management wanted to know what was going on, and he's the kind of player that doesn't want to say anything because he always wants to be on the mound. He doesn't want to be on the DL. He wants to be playing.
Well, excuse me for saying this, but I do remember when he was getting shelled, and I have to say I enjoyed it. Especially
there's a lot of people that probably enjoyed it. It was tough to watch.
Well, just when he played the Mets, I mean,
yeah,
that was, and that shoulder's a tough thing to come back from.
Yes, it is. We'll have to see if the Phillies retain his services after his contract is over. One of the bad things about the Phillies, of course, last year they traded Hunter Pence and Shane Victorino away, the 2 guys that were really producing for the team at the time, but they never really got good players back in return for them. So it's something that hopefully the Phillies pick up on and work on. If they are going to trade quality players, at least get somewhat of a quality player back.
Yeah, that's, and I think that's what the Mets are trying to do now. They're trying to get somebody back that's a quality, and of course they made trades the last few years building up their farm system, which had been depleted. So, and they've been fairly successful at that. Restocking the farm team. The problem that they're having is they really don't have any position players. They're very. I shouldn't say they don't have any, but they're further down in the lower minors, whereas the guys that most ready are pitchers, and that's enticing to teams also. So, and Cole Hamels is having not a very good year.
No, he's not. You'll be seeing Cole Hamels in the opening game with the series on the Mets. 2-10 on the year. The record doesn't really speak exactly the season that he's had. A lot of his starts, the Phillies have not been able to score runs. The Phils are are sort of chugging along. They're getting better at it, but they're still currently, I believe, 24th out of 30, or 23rd actually, as of tonight, out of 30 major league teams in runs. So they've produced very few runs for Cole Hamels starts. So a lot of his starts could have ended up different. He has looked a little bad at certain times, not certainly like the Cole Hamels that we remember, being lights out and all, but you'll be seeing him on Friday night, Game 1, Philadelphia Citizen Bank Park.
and he's not. There's no injuries or nothing. He's just having a rough year, and like you said, they're not scoring for him.
That's for sure. He's not injured. He's been healthy. He had a great spring. The Phillies are really proud of him in the spring. He had an awesome showing in spring training. He even grew a mustache. If you guys have ever seen the W.B. Mason commercial,
I remember that.
It kind of looked like the W.B. Mason character that is in that commercial.
Yes.
But as soon as the season started, he had shaved the mustache off, so maybe the baseball gods were upset with that and angry.
So did he grow it back now, or no? He's still clean shaven.
He goes back and forth between a couple days of scruffiness, but no, he has not brought the mustache back, and I think he better consider it.
And Kyle Kendrick, what kind of year is he having so far?
Kendrick's been a surprise for the Phillies. In fact, he pitched just last night when the Phillies, Jonathan Papelbon blew a save against the Washington Nationals. Very good. He's been one of the Phillies' steady pitchers this year. He's at 3.56 ERA so far with the Phils all season. He's 6-4. And he's had a couple good starts for the Phillies. He was sailing along. I think he got a couple losses just last night. And then June 8th, he suffered a 4-3 loss against the Milwaukee Brewers. But Kendrick's been steady for the Phillies.
And, Rich, this division is really Atlanta's got the big lead, but they're not like a juggernaut. I mean, they can be beaten, and the rest of the division is under 500. What the heck is going on this year?
That's for sure. It's a very strange year for the NL East. We haven't seen a year like this that I can remember in any two recent past, especially the Phillies and the Mets. The Phils and or the Mets have always had a better showing. And like you said, it's sort of a dogfight right now with the Phillies and the Nationals for second. But the more important thing is something that I looked at the other day is your wild card picture. Just because, say, the Phillies might end up in second place in the division, they might be real far back in the wild card spot. So it's just good for the bragging rights of the NL East. But if they're not going to do much better than they're doing now, certainly won't make the playoffs.
Well, it's that Central Division that they're killing everybody else in this league. With Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and St. Louis all fighting for it, and they have three of the best records in baseball, and it's just all in that Central Division. So that's what's hurting as far as the wild card goes, as far as everybody else goes. That's
for sure. The Phillies have been terrible against the NL Central so far. They've been great against the NL East. In fact, I believe the Phillies are on a 5 wins to 1 loss against the Mets so far this year, if I'm not mistaken. But that's been the Phillies' good team to play so far this year, and the Miami Marlins are 9-4 against them. So they've had a great series so far with those two teams, of course your Mets, and they're 1-2 against the Atlanta Braves. We haven't really been playing the Braves all that much so far this year. A lot of games remain with them down the road the rest of the season.
Right, right. And just skipping away from both our teams for a second, what the heck happened to the Washington Nationals?
Well, the Nationals got a taste of the injury bug. They sort of got a good taste of it, and they've slipped down faster than an elevator goes down some of these high rises. They were contending with the Braves for a long time, and then they had a slip. Now they're back where the Phillies are, kind of hovering around that 500 mark here and there, and hoping to get healthy.
Well, it's going to be an interesting second half of the season, I think. As you said, the trading deadline is going to be fascinating to see who goes where. Do you think there's going to be a ton of action or just a lot of people involved but nothing really happening?
Well, as far as the Phillies are concerned, they have a very high payroll. They've been in the top 4 payrolls now for the last 5 years at least. So I would expect the Phillies to keep selling. They sold last year. They sold Shane Victorino. They did not want to re-sign him. They could have. They got rid of Hunter Pence. He was the best Phillies offensive player at the time. Ryan Howard was injured. The Phillies were kind of listless as far as their offense was concerned. But I expect them to keep selling. The stadium is not selling out anymore. We were on a probably a 3-year pace, I believe, of sellouts at Citizens Bank Park. That has ended. There's still a fair amount of attendance there, though. They're hovering around the 40,000 mark. A sellout in Philadelphia was 43, 44. So the fans have not completely deserted this team yet. But I just see the Phillies looking at the handwriting on the wall. They have a lot of high-paid players. They're not getting the job done, and it's kind of ludicrous to keep such a high payroll when your attendance is going to be declining further. I'm not sure if we see a fire sale for the Phillies, but I kind of expect some big names to go, at least 2 possibly, at the trade deadline.
Okay. And you heard it here first. Rich seems to think that the Phillies are going to be sellers big time, and I think the Mets will probably make some moves. I don't know if they're going to make gigantic moves, but it's going to be an interesting time, and we'll see what occurs.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite times a year to listen to different teams that need different players and suppliers of those players, and hopefully if it's one of our teams, Gary, we'll get something good in return.
Yes. Now, I keep saying that the Mets should try to sign Hunter Pence is going to be a free agent, and I think he's got enough in him left that I think he would be a good addition to the Mets next year.
Yeah, he's a guy that has a quirky style in the outfield. A lot of the fans in Philly didn't quite know what to make of Hunter Pence. He's only 30 years old this season, so I think you're right. He might be coming into his best part of his baseball career. And for a team to acquire him now, he's been a major leaguer for seven years so far. This might be the best time to sign Hunter Pence.
Yeah, so we'll hope and see what happens, unless they can land a big player in the trading deadline this year, and we'll see as we always do every year. Okay, Rich, thanks for coming on the show. Is there anything you want to plug?
Well, of course, you can listen to our shows on one of the best places on the internet for podcasts. That's baseballpodcasts with an S.net. You can listen to Gary's show there. You can listen to Phillies Talk. I have my own podcast there, and a plethora of other shows. Milwaukee Brewers, Mr. Brewtown. He's an entertaining guy. We just added the Baseball Hall of Fame official podcast. So if you want to tune in there, you'll listen to some great baseball talk, and you can hear Gary, because Gary is one of the main reasons I continue to do the radio site there. Great intros, and we just have a fun time doing it. That's why we do this.
That's right, Rich. And that baseball Cooperstown collection, I believe the name of the show is, that's a great show. Just listen to a podcast that they did on Hank Greenberg.
Yes.
And it was very fascinating and little known what he went through. We know, of course, what Jackie Robinson went through, but Hank Greenberg kind of went through a similar thing as Jackie Robinson did, but it's not as broadcast about as it was. So check it out, baseballpodcast.net and radio.baseballpodcast.net, streaming live. And also, if you've got TuneIn, TuneIn.com now, you can get baseballpodcast.net as a station right on TuneIn. So check it out. If you got a new fancy car, you might have TuneIn on that. Check it out. Sign up. Make baseballpodcast.net your favorite. And you can listen to all of us from the network constantly playing on that. And once again, Rich, thanks so much for being on tonight.
Thanks, Gary, and I hope this is an entertaining season for you guys, for the Mets, and I hope this series is very good for all the fans. It's great baseball when the Phillies and the Mets play anytime.
I'm hoping it's competitive and fun.
Yes, indeed.
And we'll be right back. And that was Rich Baxter of Fightin' Phillies blog and Phillies Talk, the podcast. Go check them out. It's fun to know and to read about the other teams and to see what the competitors in your division is doing. And Rich is a great guy and does a terrific job on the site. All right, and that's basically going to do it for us for this week. And don't forget now, the Mets go to Philadelphia this weekend. Then I think they have an off day. You know, I'm looking at the schedule here, but with all these rainouts and stuff, then they head back to Chicago to play the White Sox, and they may be making a side trip to Minnesota on the off day. The schedule will have 2 off days, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a makeup of one of the rainout games against Minnesota. So, just keep watching and reading the newspaper, too, and check out when the Mets are playing and watching them. And we will be back next week with a recap of whoever they played over this week. So, you know, we're always there to recap the week's action on Mets baseball. So until next week, don't forget, keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.